Hi, I'm Ken Hill. This is the Earl of Pembroke, and we're in Weymouth Bay. Today is June the 16th, 2007, and I'm 72 years old. 50 years ago, I was just back in England after living and working for 14 months in the Antarctic. I was in a wooden hut with 11 other men at Hope Bay on the peninsula which reaches out of Antarctica up towards South America. In 1955, I had completed my 2 years in the Royal Navy during my national service. I'd learned to read Morse code and to type, and then spent some time on a cruiser in the Mediterranean and was in minesweepers for the final months. Back home in South London in 1955, I reluctantly began to think about getting a proper job. The only thing I felt definite about was that I did not want to stay in the job I did for 3 years between leaving secondary school and joining the Royal Navy at 18. But I went back to it. I was a filing clerk, shuffling papers from 8:30 to 5:30 in central London. If you continue to do well, the personnel officer told me in 1955, there might be an opening for you in the accounts department next year. Then in the gloom of a November night when I was just 21, I saw an advertisement in the London Evening News for radio operators to work in the Antarctic for the British Antarctic Survey, or as it was known then, the Falkland Islands Dependencies Survey. I went for an interview to find out more about the job and was asked whether I could join a ship that was leaving the following week. I couldn't. But a month later, my father took a day off work and drove me down to Southampton, where I boarded the Royal Research ship Shackleton, bound for Uruguay, and then the Falkland Islands, and on to the Antarctic. In Port Stanley, the main port of the Falkland Islands, we new recruits were kitted out with polar clothing, given a final dental check, and told what to do if we broke a leg out on the ice. I spent £10 on a second-hand 8mm clockwork cine camera and packed 1,000 feet of Kodachrome film into my kit bag. We headed south on February the 4th, 1956, in the old wooden Royal Research ship John Biscoe. She had already had one career laying cables on the seabed, and her semicircular hull gave us a very angular crossing of Drake's Passage between the Falkland Islands and the Antarctic. I'll never forget seeing the film with John Mills as Scott of the Antarctic in the hold of the ship. The images drifting in and out of focus as the screen swayed with the movement of the ship. My film starts in fine weather on the approach to Hope Bay in February 1956. Standard 8 film was supplied in those days as an open reel of 16mm film, which was loaded into the camera by hand and fed through the sprockets and gate onto the take-up wheel. When the film had been exposed on one side, it was turned over, and again you had to rethread it back onto the other reel. There was plenty of opportunity for light to get in, and that's why you'll see occasional flashes of orange in my film. Another challenging feature of amateur cine filming in the 1950s was the gradual rundown of the clockwork motor. Always, it seemed, when a particular shot was about to reach its climax. As the motor runs down, and when you are taking a shot, it speeds up the action when the film finally gets shown onto a screen. For example, penguins don't really run. Finally, a little reality about the weather. Almost every shot in this film was taken on a bright day when it was good to be outside. We had weather like that on around 20 days during the 14 months I lived at Hope Bay. So there's only a glimpse of the bad weather, that is the norm, at 64 degrees south, or the screaming 60s, as sailors call it. And virtually nothing shot during the long hours of darkness in the winter months. We had just 2 hours of twilight in the middle of the day in midwinter, June the 21st. I remember all that and recorded it in my diary. But this is the visual record I brought back and sent away in one parcel for processing. Then, with the indulgence of my parents, I commandeered the dining room table for 3 days, sticking the best bits together. I've only just got round to adding the commentary and some music written and performed by my son Samuel. I hope you enjoy it. The Royal Research Ship John Biscoe passing through floating ice that always surrounds the Antarctic continent. My first view of Hope Bay. A glacier comes down to the sea between the mountains, and along the foreshore are the several Argentine-based buildings. About 20 Argentines were our neighbours through the winter. Coming into view now, halfway up the hill, is Trinity House, the British base where I lived. This is the view in summer from the base hut looking out to sea, with several grounded icebergs out in the bay. The rocks on which the hut is built are exposed in summer. Winter snowfall builds up around the hut, and for most of the winter it was possible to walk up the snowdrift at the leeward end of the hut onto the roof. My bunk was behind one of these double-glazed windows, and one morning when there had been a fall of fine snow, I woke up to find a small snowdrift on my blankets. It hadn't melted. We cleared the snow from the windows to allow light into the workshop. The snow melts away in summer, and we constructed a pen for newborn husky puppies with their mother. We recorded the weather every 3 hours, using these instruments to keep track of temperature, humidity and wind speed. Good weather meant we could replace the felt that covered the timber roof, a job that needed doing every 2 or 3 years. Lee Rice from Belfast, base leader in the second summer, gets to grips with roofing material. Time for a tea break on the roof, with music from the wind-up gramophone and 78 RPM records. Ken Brown is pouring the tea for Roger Tuft. They are both from Wales. Homemade cakes, of course. Lee Rice and fellow Irishman Sam Blake work out how to tackle the chimney. Pat Thompson on the left and Nick Nichols, both from London, returning from an unsuccessful seal shoot. There aren't many beaches in the Antarctic, but we had one. Here the edge of the land ice had recently dropped onto the pebbles. High tides wear away the underneath of the land ice where it meets the beach, making ice caves. Icicles form when melting water drips off the ice cliff. Here you see the edge of the ice cliff, at this point about 4 meters high. In other areas, ice cliffs rise to 100 or 200 meters, particularly where a glacier or ice shelf projects out from the land and into the sea. You can see here how the action of the high tide has worn the ice back to the very hard core. The icicles make natural ice lollies on good days like these. Dick Walcott from New Zealand with a husky puppy near the hut in summer.
Cables over the roof are cemented into the rock to secure the structure during high winds. One blizzard lasted 4 days, with wind speeds averaging around 70 miles per hour. I used to send our weather reports by Morse code to Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands. In those days, communication by voice was difficult over the distance of 600 miles. Here it's not snowing, that's just loose snow being blown along by a high wind. The next shots were taken outside during a blizzard, when Pat Thompson went to read the instruments. It's difficult to control your progress in such high winds, particularly when the wind is in your face and full of stinging snowflakes. This is the return journey of about 50 yards. You won't see much film taken outside in such circumstances. After high winds, the instruments need to be cleared of ice. Part of the weather program was to release a hydrogen-filled balloon and track its progress through a theodolite to determine wind speeds in the upper air. Dick Walcott does the business. More snow conditions, a high wind full of snow, when you're in danger of experiencing a whiteout, the opposite of total darkness. It's like standing inside a table tennis ball. Derek Clark from Surrey, our diesel mechanic, looked after the little ransom tractor to help pull supplies up from the beach. He also maintained the hand-cranked generators that provided us with light and power. Our main form of transport was husky dogs and sledges. Here you see a team being taken from when they are tethered in the open air to the sledge. After 8 months running around as puppies, they are outside in all weathers. Surveyor Jim Medell is getting the team together, while Nick Nichols tries to keep the excited dogs under control before the off. The sledge is empty, which means it's a training run. If they were going more than a couple of miles, they would take a tent and food. We had no weather forecasts, and a blizzard can arrive with very little warning. The team stops for a little fight before setting off again. Here we are off on a trip to a small hut 17 miles away at Deuce Bay. The climb is up the side of a mountain range, and you can see we're heavily laden with tent, food and other gear. Nick Nichols is my sledging partner. We're down from the mountains now and out on the frozen sea of Deuce Bay on the 4th of September 1956, early spring. The ice melted and was blown away by mid-November. When the sea freezes, those icebergs floating in the sea get frozen in, and we weave our way in and out of them on our crossing. Some are tiny. This one is about 15 meters high, and the hard, shiny surface shows that at some point it has turned over. The sea melts the ice below the water, and when the top is heavier than the bottom, it turns over. The surface isn't flat, since the wind creates snowdrifts in the lee of icebergs. These shots are of the return journey over the sea ice, with Dr. Hugh Simpson of Edinburgh driving the dogs. We came across patches of sastrugi, where the wind creates waves of soft snow, which then freeze hard. Not easy for the dogs or the sledge to negotiate. Another obstacle to overcome, but we're still on the sea ice. Here's the distant view on this unusually clear day. Those mountains at the head of the bay are 15 miles away. There's a bicycle mileometer on the trailing wheel, so we can calculate distance, even if visibility is poor and we can't see landmarks. The frozen sea ice still rises and falls with the tide, so there's a tide crack where it meets the land ice. Everybody rests for 5 minutes in every hour during sledge journeys. Climbing the mountain range again, no more riding the sledge for the time being. This is where everybody does their bit to keep up the momentum. Now we're over the top and down the other side, with occasional spills on the way. This is the final approach down to the hut at Hope Bay, and everybody is looking forward to food and a rest. We had about 100 huskies brought down from the Canadian Arctic and Greenland in the late 1940s. There is some wolf in their ancestry. At about 8 months old they begin to fight to determine who will be leader of the pack. That's when we tie them up so they can't reach each other to fight. They always get excited when anyone approaches them. It's usually feeding time. When they're travelling, they eat pemmican, compressed vegetables and fatty meat. At the base, they eat seal meat. We had a pair of twin dogs, here being entertained by Derek Clark. These two puppies are pretend fighting. If they were serious, their tails would be down, and we would stop them very carefully to avoid getting bitten ourselves. Our heaviest dog was Roddy, 8 stones. We had 4 sets of puppies born during the year, always a great attraction for cameras and leisure time. They stay with their mother for 3 weeks, and then mum is tied up again, and the puppies are left to run around the hut, sleeping together underneath it. We tried to stop the puppies biting sledging ropes. At the time we were testing early plastics to reduce the friction between the snow surface and the wooden runners. Here they are playing amongst the sledges. We had 6 wooden sledges until 3 of them were blown away during a blizzard and never seen again. They were tied up more securely after that. Huskies were banned from the Antarctic in 1995. They were not native species. In some terrain, huskies are much more effective than mechanical vehicles. The old hands regretted the ban. They said you can always eat a dog if you're in trouble. The breeding process was started by tying up a good bitch with a dog overnight. We envied the pups their early diet of condensed milk, but not the chopped up raw seal liver which accompanied it. Then they go on to raw meat, penguin or seal. We didn't play with the pups often. They were working dogs and thrive on a system of respect and reward. The adults are fed every 2 days when idle, every night when working. The frozen seal meat has to be chopped up into blocks with an axe. Pongo, the black puppy, was the sole survivor from a litter of 8 pups. Mothers are left alone in kennels on the end of the hut with their pups for the first 24 hours. Pongo's mother clearly felt unsettled and ate the whole litter except for Pongo. Puppies are great to relax with when the weather is good, and we use lots of film on them. Pat Thompson spends time with one of the puppies. The snow around the hut gets discoloured during the summer, and if you are running around in the sunshine and happen to have a very thick black furry coat, it gets hot. But there are always methods of keeping cool when there is snow. The coke that was in these sacks is now burned away, so they make a good place to rest. Some puppies went on walks with us, and here at the beach they find some small snow-covered crevasses. I came across some much more dangerous crevasses during my first sledge journey. Base leader Lofty Worswick, 6 feet 8, and Wally Herbert starting the longest sledge journey of the year down the east coast of the Antarctic Peninsula. We didn't see seals often. This is a Weddell seal escaping through a hole back into the sea. A shooting party is here hunting a leopard seal on an ice floe. The seal is more occupied trying to catch a couple of penguins. Roger Tuft shoots the seal from a respectable distance. They are quite agile, even out of the water. It's as well to ensure the seal is dead before trying to move it. We bagged 2 leopard seals that day, using our small wooden boat and an outboard motor to go out to the ice floe near the beach. Full-grown leopard seals are around 4 meters long and are very accomplished swimmers. A few years back, a young biologist working for the British Antarctic Survey was attacked and killed by a leopard seal while diving among ice floes. These seals are about 3 meters long and will be hauled up close to the dogs, ready to be chopped up for them. We included seal steak in our own diet, and our Scottish doctor once stuffed and cooked a seal heart, which was delicious when compared with tinned luncheon meat or corned beef, our staple alternatives. We all took turns cooking. The penguins arrive in spring to nest on the rocky slopes which are bare of snow during the summer. They are Adelie penguins. An early French explorer named them after his wife, not presumably because they reminded him of her. Wherever there are penguins, there are sheathbills. These are scavengers about the size of pigeons. The skua is also in evidence on the rookery, looking for untended eggs or penguin chicks. Skuas commute between the Arctic and the Antarctic. Adelie penguins are knee-high to a human. Their only enemies are in the sea, leopard seals and killer whales, so they don't quite know what to make of human beings sharing their safe habitat. Adelie penguins are not really inquisitive. It's more as though they're mystified. There are no native land animals in the Antarctic. These two seem to have decided just to ignore me. They are very close to the ice edge, and you expect them to escape by diving into the sea, but that's where there may be leopard seals. They leap out of the sea onto an ice foot and then travel up well-worn paths to the rocky areas. The small stones are collected in penguins' beaks and used as nesting material. They normally walk in a rather dignified way, but if they're in a hurry, they fall forward and slide along on their white fronts, using their feet and flippers for propulsion. This one has found a suitable ledge for a nest and has a scavenging sheathbill in attendance. Hope Bay has many inlets along its shoreline, which all freeze over during the winter. By the end of the summer, the 3 or 4 square miles of the penguin rookery smell very organic. The snow is melting into thaw streams, and the temperature can stay above freezing all day. There's a marauding skua again. Penguins gather pebbles into a pile to make a nest, and the eggs are laid in a shallow hole in the top. We collected eggs to provide variety in our own food, but we never boiled them. The white of a penguin egg cooks into a clear jelly, but fresh omelettes are good. In the first shots I took of these nests, I was standing up or kneeling, and the penguins got very worried. Later I realized that if I was lying down and was no taller than they were reasonably happy. So I moved closer very slowly, and eventually found a nest where a chick had just hatched. The parent was very protective, warming it among the soft feathers under its body. The chick appears to be struggling, but I'm sure the parent is just making sure it doesn't climb out of the nest. It has very little protection against the cold at this stage. Here the chick is shuffled back into the shell to help keep it out of the wind. Each parent takes a turn in looking after the chicks. A typical nest will have up to 3 eggs. After a few weeks, the young penguins join a crèche under the care of a group of parents. The chicks have a brown, fluffy coat, while the adult feathers are growing underneath. Half the parents go down to the sea to feed on plankton, tiny shrimp-like organisms, while the others stay on nursery duty. It is impossible to distinguish male from female by sight. Keeping the chicks together protects them from the skuas that are always flying overhead looking for eggs or chicks to steal. Some chicks are determined to get away, but this one doesn't make it. Returning parents have food stored in their throats, and the chicks reach inside to extract the partly digested plankton. A parent always finds its own chick, and will often draw it away from the others before starting to provide food. The edge of the rookery was about a mile from the hut, and we took care that our husky puppies, who were not tethered, did not disturb the birds. The chicks grow very quickly, reaching adult height in about 3 months. They need to be strong enough to swim north hundreds of miles with their parents. They will spend the winter months in warmer climes, South Africa, South America, or on the subantarctic islands. Penguins are conscious that a leopard seal may be waiting in the sea close to the ice edge, so they all dive in together to reduce the risk of being caught by those snapping jaws. Coming out is also dangerous, so they do it at speed. They are fast swimmers. They head for the ice foot and push down with their flippers at the last minute. They have been seen to leap around 3 meters onto ice. They need to breathe air, of course, so they surface at intervals while swimming, like dolphins. Then comes a laborious climb up to the nesting area to feed the chicks and take over guard duty while the other parent goes to feed and to get cleaned up in the process. We varied our diet by eating 1 or 2 penguins. The meat is black and slightly fishy with a fatty outer skin. We found no recipe for it in the penguin cookery book. Another general view of the rookery in sunshine with even less snow. The penguin mating call is quite a performance, and you would think that that would be one way of distinguishing male from female. But no, they look the same and sound similar. Clearly you have to be a penguin to tell the difference, and there was plenty of evidence to show that they knew all about that. When the brown fluffy coat comes off the chicks, it gets blown everywhere. We discovered some that had managed to get into the cooking inside the hut. Underneath the fluff are the small, closely packed feathers which make up the coat of the adult penguin. They don't seem to know what their flippers are for at this stage, but as soon as they hit the water, they'll make use of them. It's not just the distance that's a challenge. There are leopard seals and killer whales to avoid. Another arrival in spring is the first of the supply ships, in this case the Royal Research ship Shackleton again. Stores are towed onto the beach in barges, then manhandled onto a sledge for the tractor trip up to the hut. Derek Clark and Laurie Catherall do the hauling here. Pat Thompson gives a hand at the back. First off the boat are 12 sacks of mail. It only takes 8 people to form a crowd in the Antarctic. Everything that 12 men need for a year, except water, has to be brought in by boat. There is always an extra year's supply in reserve. The first base hut, built at Hope Bay, burned down with the loss of 2 lives, so safety is a key concern. Here, meteorologist John Noble takes a break to read a letter. American and Argentine visitors at Trinity House. I'm standing on the right in the doorway. I had injured my foot while working on the roof and couldn't walk very well. The visitors were from the Argentine Navy icebreaker General San Martin. 1957 selfie, as I take a last look at the scenery. After 14 months at Hope Bay, I'm now heading north to the Falkland Islands. The change from the base hut to a ship's cabin was the biggest adjustment I had to make during the journey back. This is brash ice, which keeps the sea surface perfectly calm. With added sunshine, it makes for an exhilarating way to travel. Our journey home took 2 months via the Falklands, South Georgia, Tristan da Cunha and St. Helena. We got back in June 1957.